You want USC football coverage? We've got USC football coverage. Alicia Day Artola joining us from Reign of Troy to break down the Trojans and some happy good news for the first time in the offseason. And it is just not slightly positive. It is huge. We appreciate you jumping on board, Alicia, to break things down for us.
Yeah, it's nice to finally have something good to talk about with USC. It feels like it's been a while.
Bad season, bad offseason, disappointing recruiting cycle. Then, bam, okay, Bru McCoy. We'll see about him, but the signs are positive since he has gone to USC, now Texas, and back possibly to Southern California. But we'll deal with the certainty of Chris Steele first.
Yeah, this was the biggest of the two, actually. Chris Steele is a bigger deal for USC because Chris Steele can actually have an immediate impact at a position that USC has been desperate for somebody to have an immediate impact in. USC had him as a commit last summer. The season hadn't really gone the way that USC wanted, and he was one of the casualties of that. He ultimately decommitted and signed with Florida. And when he decided to leave Florida for personal reasons, USC fans definitely perked up and were like, "Ooh, this could get interesting." But it never really felt like USC was in the cards there, and he committed to Oregon pretty quickly. And so it was just kind of one of those things that you said, yep, this is what happens when you go 5-7. This is what happens when you can't guarantee a player that you will put him in the NFL. And then lo and behold, a couple weeks later, all of a sudden things just fell into place. And he spoke, he came out yesterday on Wednesday and was talking about his reasons for ultimately switching his commitment from Oregon to USC. It has to do with some family things. He's from Southern California. He wants to stay closer to his family, who is going through some financial hardship apparently right now. And so USC gets him, and it's a huge deal for USC because he will probably be given a waiver from the NCAA to play as a freshman, and despite his transfer. And USC is replacing every starter in the secondary this coming season. And particularly at cornerback, they have some talent there, but it's all unproven. And it was going to be Elijah Griffin and Isaac Taylor Stewart are starters and good or bust. Like anything short of those two guys coming through, USC was going to be in trouble. When you bring in Chris Steele, who is a guy who can compete for a starting job as a true freshman, not only do you have a potential starter that you're bringing in, even if he's not a starter, he's competition. He's somebody who in practice will drive the other players to potentially get better, who will drive himself to get better. So it's really a win-win for USC as far as the biggest position of need on the roster, getting one of the top recruits in California. Not only does it make the recruiting class look a whole lot better, but it makes your secondary look a whole lot more stable by bringing him in.
So somebody else's misstep, that meaning not necessarily specifically Dan Mullen, but he's responsible, of course, causing the situation at the University of Florida. And Chris Steele there again, it appeared as though he was headed to Oregon, which the momentum is such a big part of recruiting and the perception of which programs on the rise, which ones are falling. And certainly that's been the narrative for both Oregon and USC. Flip the coin. So Chris Steele going to Oregon was not a big surprise in regards to just that being the feel for that's where the chic most recent spot in the Pac-12 would be. But USC gets Chris Steele to come back home. Bru McCoy, it appears, is headed in the same direction. Number one athlete, according to 247 Sports Composite, number two player in California. Bru McCoy, of course, had headed to Texas. And as you had mentioned, feeling a bit homesick. That seems to be the story.
Yeah, and that's why it's not official that he's going to be going to USC, but because he didn't mention USC in his statement that he put out when he announced his transfer from Texas, but he did say, I'm going back home, and there has been no chatter about UCLA. So you sort of have to say, yeah, it's definitely going to be USC. It's just waiting on official word. And it's another huge pickup for USC, another recruitment that they'd kind of botched, not just in the sense of the way that he enrolled at USC and then transferred after 2 weeks and all that kind of stuff, but the fact that it even in the early signing period that USC was in such a tight battle with Texas in the first place. Bru McCoy should have been a dyed in the wool Cardinal and gold Trojan from day one. There shouldn't have been any question about where he was going to end up, and the fact that they had to battle Texas in the first place was a red flag. That he ultimately jumped ship because of the Cliff Kingsbury stuff, huge red flag. You cannot whitewash how bad of a moment that was for USC. What's turned around is that USC made the right hire for the offensive coordinator in Graham Harrell, and that USC had a pretty solid positive spring. And Bru McCoy got to Austin, realized that, it's not Southern California. He's not around his family, all of those kinds of things. And again, the door opened for USC to right a wrong, more or less, the wrong that they themselves had done by not securing that enrollment in the first place. But he will probably have to sit out because the NCAA doesn't generally grant hardship waivers for homesickness. But either way, like you said, he's the number one athlete in the class, a top tier wide receiver, a top tier linebacker in high school, and he will strengthen USC whenever he becomes eligible, particularly if he does end up at wide receiver, where USC is about to lose Michael Pittman to graduation after this season. Tyler Vaughns will be eligible to go to the NFL after this season. So in 2020, USC is going to need the reinforcements in the receiving core, and Bru McCoy will be someone that you pencil in as a day one starter after taking his redshirt season.
Get Alicia De Artola on the line. We encourage you to stop over on Reign of Troy to check out her work in covering USC football. Always does an outstanding job for us. And so we've got recruit number 3, commitment from Jack Yary. You've got to be maybe up in years like myself to remember his father playing for the Minnesota Vikings with 4 Super Bowl appearances, Pro Football Hall of Famer Jack Yary, not of the ilk of a Steele or a Bru McCoy when it comes to recruiting rankings, but still a top 20 tight end in the nation. And it's always nice to keep one of your own at home.
Absolutely. He's a Trojan legacy. And in some sense, that's really important for USC at this stage. If you can't convince the son of Ron Yary to attend USC, then there is really something wrong with the program. It's a USC family, and he's a 3-star tight end. He's an intriguing athlete. He wants to play tight end. There is obviously he has the body to potentially be tried at offensive tackle at some point. He obviously has the pedigree with his family, with his father in that position. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops as a player, but he's a guy that USC can bring in, feel good about bringing him in because they keep that legacy intact. And also they need tight ends. Graham Harrell's air raid does utilize the tight end. USC is thin at that position and does have a couple guys who will be graduating in a couple years. So they're going to want to reinforce that spot. And I think Jack Yary is a very good start there. So it's definitely another little positive nugget that you can throw in there as far as the general momentum of positivity that is flowing through USC right now.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down USC. We've got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. Always does an outstanding job getting us set for 2019 most recently. And we would like to remind you, you can help us build the channel by grabbing the Amazon link in the description section below. Doesn't cost you an extra penny. Don't have to buy the product. Just grab that link to do your Amazon shopping. Also, join us at the college football, voice of college football community over on Patreon, where we deliver 2 exclusive live streams involving you. So we bring you on to talk to the voice of college football and also my direct response to your viewer comments. To date this year, we're over 36,000 comments compared to 6,000 at this point last year. So thank you for the response.